everyone. We know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. It's time for our show, ILTV's Weekly Review, where we'll give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days right here from Tel Aviv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, here to keep you informed. Lots of Israelis have renewed hope today after Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas agreed to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, all in efforts to kickstart the deadlocked peace process. Abbas says the proposed summit will take place under the auspices of U.S. President Donald Trump. The American leader reportedly intends to actually issue invitations to the talks when he visits Israel and the Palestinian territories on May 22nd and 23rd. Abbas and Netanyahu might even get together during the presidential visit. Washington's last attempt to broker peace broke down in 2014, but that 9-month initiative never included a face-to-face meeting between Netanyahu and Abbas. In fact, they haven't sat down at the negotiating table for 7 years. Since that time, the PA boss has been insisting that he will never resume negotiations unless Israel freezes all settlement building and agrees to release Palestinian prisoners. This has contributed to a total impasse because Netanyahu has said he won't meet if there are any preconditions. Now, Abbas is implying that he may drop those demands, which indicates that a real breakthrough might be on the horizon. Further details are now emerging on the closed-door discussions between Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House on May 4th. Former top PA negotiator Nabil Shaath says the meeting was far more successful than anticipated. He describes the American leader as having listened attentively when Abbas said he wanted to reopen peace negotiations with Israel based on the 2007 to 2008 Annapolis conference with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. Olmert had purposed land swaps amounting to 6.3% of the West Bank, but Palestinians were only willing to accept 1.9% of those swaps in order to ensure that they would retain part of East Jerusalem as their future capital. The PA boss reportedly said there's no way that he'll accept the positions set out by current Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but that it won't take much bargaining to close the Olmert-era gap. Consensus on the critical border issue, the Palestinians say, would impact the remaining core topics and pave the path to a permanent agreement. Nevertheless, Abbas still says he won't accept anything less than a Palestinian state along the 1967 lines with East Jerusalem as its capital. As far as Trump's admonition against PA payments to terrorists who attack Israelis, Shaath claims the matter is a precondition raised by Israel that should be left for final status talks. Trump says he's anxious to reach the ultimate deal by achieving a Mideast peace accord and will work toward that when he visits both later this month. A secret deal between the Israeli Prime Minister and Finance Minister to freeze the demolition of all illegally built homes for the next 2 years has just been exposed. Such news is a big deal for much of Israel's Arab community since many of their homes are built without proper building permits. The Israeli investigative journal The Marker has published 2 letters exposing the deal, and according to one of them written by the Deputy Attorney General, law enforcement officials have not been made aware of the deal. It was apparently kept under wraps in order to avoid upsetting more right-wing coalition partners. Arab Israelis often claim that it's disproportionately harder for them to secure the necessary permits to build homes, and as a result often build them without the required permits and on disputed land. Throughout the Negev desert, there are dozens of Bedouin villages stuck in a legal limbo, many of which have been demolished and rebuilt several times over. Despite the fact that the freeze is not officially being implemented, the Attorney General's office has confirmed that enforcement against illegal construction built outside of municipal territories has been given a higher priority over construction on private land. Initially, both the Prime Minister's office and Ministry of Finance have refused to respond to the Marker's expose, though the Prime Minister's office later recanted, saying that no such agreement exists. Just in case there was any doubt, Hamas is speaking out to make it very clear that the terror group still seeks Israel's destruction. One of Hamas's most senior officials says a political policy document released in Qatar last week in no way contradicts its founding 1988 covenant. Even though the Islamist organization maintains that it technically agrees to the creation of a transitional Palestinian state within the 1967 lines, it continues to advocate the elimination of the Jewish state.
لن نتنازل عن شبر واحد، عن فتر واحد، عن مليمتر واحد من فلسطين، لأنها جزء من ديننا ومن عقيدتنا ثابت لا يتغير. إذا أيها الإخوة الأحباب، ليس هناك أي تناقض بين الثابت بين ما قلناه في وثيقتنا وبين والعقد الذي بيننا وبين الله تبارك وتعالى.
The statements come after many Mideast analysts jumped to the conclusion that the new Hamas document might be softening the group's language towards Israel. But the policy still rejects Israel's right to exist and calls for an armed struggle to liberate all of historical Palestine.
ثبتنا الثوابت التي لا تتغير، ثبتناها. إنه الأرض لا نعترف بإسرائيل. إيش معنى لا نعترف بإسرائيل؟ الدولة كما قلت أرض وشعب وسلطة كما تعرفون. طيب لا نعترف بأن هذه الأرض المحتلة عام 48 ملك لإسرائيل، لا نعترف. ودين، هذا دين لا يتغير ولا يتبدل. اثنين، لا نعترف بأن هذا الشعب الذي جاء هنا هو شعب له حق.
Zahar is also denying that Hamas is in any way trying to align itself with Mahmoud Abbas and his Fatah party. The Palestinian president says he recognizes Israel and is seeking a final peace agreement based on the frontier that existed before the Six-Day War. Now that the Palestinian Authority is taking a harder line against its rival Hamas, fears of a humanitarian crisis in Gaza are exploding. The territory's health ministry is now warning that Ramallah's latest decision to stop delivering medicine and even baby formula to the Strip could be catastrophic. The decision was just handed down 2 days ago, but Gaza officials say there's already a serious shortage of urgently needed supplies. It's now been 3 months since the last shipment from the West Bank, and no one knows how long until the next one will arrive. The head of the ministry's pharmaceutical department says that area hospitals lack 17 different kinds of cancer-fighting drugs that patients need to take daily. Many Gazans are now reportedly seeking alternative medical care in Israel. One Ramallah spokesman is responding to the latest charges by saying that PA President Mahmoud Abbas has no knowledge of any decisions to cut off medicine or baby formula. But the West Bank government has recently imposed a number of heavy restrictions aimed at pressuring Hamas to relinquish its governance of the Strip to Abbas. They include the refusal to foot the bill for electricity that Israel supplies to Gaza, as well as slashing the salaries of PA employees in the enclave by 30%. But at the same time, Abbas has canceled the need for Gaza's population to pay fees for a range of public services for things like health and education. This step was apparently done with the intention of humiliating Hamas, based on accusations that the terrorist rulers only use the funds for their own personal gain. The Hamas terror organization in Gaza has just elected a new leader. Ismail Haniyeh has been tapped to be the new head, and he will replace Khalid Mashal, who's just finished his 2 terms in office. ILTV's Aaron Porras returns with more. So, Aaron, set the scene for this election.
All right. Well, as you said, Khalid Mashal is stepping down as Hamas has a 2-term limit. And he's just reached that 2-term limit despite working from exile in Qatar, which I always thought was very interesting. And the elections are very big news for 2 reasons. Number one, because it actually legitimizes, in a sense, the democracy that is the Hamas terror organization, which is kind of an oxymoron. And the second reason is because this is the first time since 2007, when Hamas split away from the Palestinian Authority, that they're going to have a new leader. So this is really big.
Well, let's check out your report.
All right, let's go.
Mashal first came into power in 2004 after the Israeli assassinations of the group's founders, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin and Abdelaziz al-Rantisi. Ismail Haniyeh is a former Palestinian prime minister who was dismissed by Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in 2007 following Hamas's violent coup in the Gaza Strip. Hamas spokesman Fazi Barhoum said of the election that, quote, "This proves that despite the hard and complicated situation, the movement could finish its elections in all of its phases and elect Ismail Haniyeh. This proves that the movement is democratic, renewed, and based on consultation," end quote. Newly elected Hamas head Hania is also believed to be one of the primary authors of a new Hamas document that reasserts the terrorist organization's goal of overthrowing Israel, but also accepts a Palestinian state based on the 1967 borderlines.
شيء كثير مهم جدا انه كمان يعرف الجميع بانه هذه الوثيقه لم تاتي بناء على ضغوطات من اي طرف كان بقدر ما انها نتاج المطابخ المتعدده داخل هذه الحركه خلال ال4 سنوات الماضيه واللي كان اليوم هو يوم الاشهار عنها والاعلان بهذا الوضوح وبهذه السعه وبهذا الاتساع اللي احنا شفناه.
Israel has dismissed the new Hamas document as an attempt to fool the world.
Parisians woke up to both fresh baguettes and a fresh-faced president this morning as the former banker Emmanuel Macron became the country's youngest leader since Napoleon Bonaparte.
Now that virtually all the votes have been counted, it's clear that Macron clobbered his opponent Marine Le Pen. The winning centrist candidate garnered at least 64% of his nation's support, while the far-right leader of the National Front Party convinced less than 34% of the public to vote for her. Here in Israel, it was even more of a slam dunk for Macron, as an overwhelming 96.3% of the dual French-Israeli citizens supported the new president. Israeli leaders are wholeheartedly congratulating Macron too, with many saying his victory over Le Pen symbolizes a triumph over anti-Semitism. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he's looking forward to working with the new French president, particularly in countering the Islamic terror that plagues both nations, as well as other world democracies. Many of Macron's Mideast policies aren't really clear yet, but this past Friday he said France shouldn't grant unilateral recognition of Palestine because it would undermine stability and negatively impact French relations with Israel. After a 2015 visit to Israel while serving as his nation's economy minister, Macron said he was very impressed with the Jewish nation's startup culture and high-tech companies, and intended to utilize that inspiration back home. Finally, though he supported European Union plans to label settlement products, which is strongly rejected by Israel, he also generally opposed anti-Israel boycotts.
Convicted terrorist Marwan Barghouti called for all Palestinians incarcerated in Israeli jails to join him in an open-ended hunger strike starting this past April 17th. But it appears now that Barghouti himself has not been honoring his own self-declared movement.
Video footage of Barghouti secretly eating in his cell has been released by the Israeli Prison Service. He was first filmed munching on some cookies 10 days into the strike, and then consuming a candy bar and some salt on May 5th. The food appears to have been carefully hidden in his bathroom, and it's not yet clear how it got there. The major Palestinian leader is serving 5 life terms plus 40 years behind bars for the murder and attempted murder of Israeli civilians and soldiers. Israeli officials believe he called the hunger strike in a challenge to his political rival, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Many Palestinians outside the jail are demonstrating in solidarity by rioting or also refusing to eat, including Leila Khaled. She belongs to the radical PFLP terror group and gained notoriety in 1969 for becoming the first woman in history to hijack an airplane. Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan called Barghouti a murderer and a hypocrite, continuing, quote, "As I said from the very beginning, this hunger strike was never about the conditions of the convicted terrorists, which meet international standards. It is about advancing Marwan Barghouti's political ambitions to replace Abbas. Barghouti is a murderer and a hypocrite who urged his fellow prisoners to strike and suffer while he ate behind their back," end quote. A prison service spokesperson said that, quote, "The video speaks for itself."
German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier is currently in the Holy Land for meetings with Israeli and Palestinian leaders. He started off in Jerusalem for talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Speculations are rising that the 4-day visit could be somewhat awkward, however, since the Israeli premier just canceled talks with Germany's foreign minister last month for having met with groups that criticize Israel's treatment of Palestinians. So far, though, there have been no signs of the rift, as the two leaders praised the strong relationship between their two states.
Equally, we have developed a great economic partnership. We're two advanced technological societies. We have much to gain by seizing the future together.
I think we are now in a status that our two countries are bound by deep friendship and by the common conviction that we should work for a common future. That is what we have to do. That is the sense why I'm here nearly every year. And thank you for your time today. We have, I think, some hours for an extended exchange, and we know that we have to discuss the situation in the whole region.
Steinmeier was later accompanied by his wife to the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial Museum, where he laid a wreath and lit the eternal flame, in memory of the 6 million Jews murdered by Nazi Germany and its collaborators.
Fassbare Schuld haben wir Deutsche auf uns geladen. Hier an diesem Ort wird die Erinnerung ganz Schmerz, Trauer und Scham. In Verantwortung für das, was geschehen ist, stehen wir fest an der Seite Israels und arbeiten für eine gemeinsame Zukunft.
Israeli President Reuven Rivlin also hosted his German counterpart for a round of talks.
אדוני הנשיא, ביקורך הנוכחי מצטרף לביקורם של שר החוץ גבריאל והנשיא לשעבר גאוק לפני כשבועיים. יחד, ביקורים אלה משמשים עדות לכך שדווקא מתוך העבר הטראומטי שלא יישכח לעולם, צמחה מערכת יחסים מכבדת ומיוחדת בין גרמניה לישראל.
The German leader then took time to address students at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, where he voiced his confidence in Israeli democracy.
Ich habe mich gefragt, was macht die israelische Demokratie eigentlich so stark und lebendig? Am Ende, wenn ich an meine inzwischen vielen Freundschaften mit Israelis denke, an die unzähligen durchwachten Nächte voller hitziger Debatten, dann liegt in meinen Augen der vitale Kern der israelischen Demokratie.
Steinmeier was really given the star treatment during his visit to the Israeli capital, as he was even escorted on a tour of the city's famous Machane Yehuda outdoor market by a very special tour guide, none other than Israeli President Rivlin himself.
The chairman of the U.S. Military Joint Chiefs of Staff has been very busy on his state visit to Israel ever since his government aircraft hit the tarmac. General Joseph Dunford and his wife were welcomed by Israeli and American military officers at Ben Gurion Airport, followed by an honor guard at Israeli military headquarters in Tel Aviv. Dunford met with Israeli Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot during an official welcoming ceremony. The top American defense chief then held talks with Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman. The pinnacle of the visit is undoubtedly the general's meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. According to a statement from the Israeli army, the discussions are focusing on cooperation between the two allies' armies, as well as mutual challenges facing both nations. The Joint Chiefs trip comes just about 2 weeks before U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to make his own very first historic visit to Israel. A viral campaign to help Syrians in need is spreading across university campuses, and ILTV has an inside look at who's behind it.
I'm NYU, and I support Syrians with the Save Syrians campaign.
I go to Maynooth University, and I'm supporting the Save Syrians campaign.
I study at the University of the Witwatersrand, and I support the Save Syria campaign.
From Ireland to South Africa to the United States, thousands of students are gathering on college campuses across the world to stand up for Syrians in need. But here's what you wouldn't expect. The entire movement is being organized by pro-Israel student organizations, even though Syria has long been one of Israel's greatest enemies.
We're all human, and maybe we have fought in the past, but holding a grudge does no good.
Pro-Israel students have joined to launch SaveSyrians.com, a website dedicated to raising awareness and money for the victims of the 6-year Syrian civil war. And they're calling on everybody they can to provide support.
This isn't an Israel problem, this isn't a Syrian problem, this is not a Middle Eastern problem, this is a humanitarian problem. And this is something that affects all of us, regardless of our past, our race, our ethnicity. This is something that is involving humanity, and we should do everything we can to help it.
470,000 people have been murdered in Syria over the course of the 6-year Syrian civil war, which has been raging just over Israel's border. Every day, the Israeli army picks up injured Syrians and transports them into Israel for further help. Over 5,000 Syrians have received medical treatment in Israel, and over 800 of them have been treated in this very hospital.
Sometimes people ask me, who are these people? And I say, well, actually, I don't know. I see a human being who needs my help, and that's what I do.
سكن لا، بس إن معاملة إنسانية أفضل من كثير دول. نحن مناطق حدودية أغلقت حدود، لبنان، أردن، كله سكر حدود.
Despite the extensive humanitarian aid that Israel is providing to Syrians in need, many students on college campuses are not aware of it. But the Save Syrians campaign seems to be changing that. At the University of Santa Barbara, the Student Supporting Israel organization says their events to show solidarity with Syria are transforming perspectives.
I just heard about Israel helping out Syria and giving aid, and how I hadn't seen that anywhere in the news.
I would not expect it, actually.
I know that with their history and the religious conflict and territorial conflict, so that is pretty surprising that Israel is giving aid to Syria. It does help change my mind.
Top Israeli leaders were in the United States this weekend to attend the annual Jerusalem Post conference held in New York City. ILTV sent our very own correspondent Rob Jacobson to check it out and report back.
It's the 6th year the Jerusalem Post is organizing a conference in New York, essentially giving a stage for Israeli politicians to come and say whatever they want to the American people, unfiltered.
Backstage, it looks like Israeli politicians have a more positive outlook about the future of Israeli-American relations, especially given U.S. President Donald Trump's upcoming visit to the State of Israel.
We are very exciting from the cooperation with the new administration. I think the bond between Israel and the United States is very strong.
Donald Trump is a real friend of Israel, of the State of Israel. I think he has his heart in the right place, and he will be warmly welcomed in Israel.
Former Israeli Chief of Staff Dan Chalutz claims Donald Trump's history as a businessman will likely help his approach in the Israeli-Palestinian peace process.
I'm very supportive of this initiative of President Trump to have a deal. And business people, when they are saying we should have a deal, in the end of the day they are reaching a deal.
One of the major issues in the conference was if Israel will still be able to remain the state of all Jews, with the growing divide between American Jewry, the Jewish diaspora, and Israel.
I don't think that North American Jews, which live in a very open and free society, look at Israel from that standpoint, that that's our life insurance policy. They look at Israel as being, yes, it's to have a home of Israel and to have it there for us as a possibility down the road is a maybe.
This is an extremely important moment in terms of the evolution of Israel's relations with the Jewish diaspora. We're seeing new voices coming out of Israel, the understanding that a vibrant diaspora is almost a Zionist imperative, and therefore Israel needs to rethink its relationship with the Jewish diaspora. That thinking that began outside of government is increasingly embraced in government.
The organizers were very pleased with the wide attendance at this year's event, and although no big headlines came out at the conference, it was still important that the message was heard in public loud and clear. Reporting from the J-Post conference, for ILTV, I'm Ron Jacobson, New York.
Frequent flyers, get ready because Israel's El Al Airlines have just made their flights a lot more comfortable. ILTV's Aaron Porras is back with the scoop. Aaron, I can't imagine that it's that difficult to make a flight more comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I can think of way more ways to make it worse.
Well, that's not what we're looking for, obviously.
Yes, that's true.
Luckily, El Al found something, a way to actually make traveling, 10 hours from here to New York, wherever it is.
Yep, no, it's like you say, a new design that was just released on El Al flights, which won the gold medal at the Innovation Amenities category in the Travel Plus Innovation Competition held in Germany. Has just been released. It's available on all El Al flights. I'll tell you about it in just a sec.
I guess I'm going to have to start traveling with El Al now.
The wearable blanket allows El Al passengers to stay cozy with their hands free during the long and typically uncomfortable flights. The blanket has openings for the hands and head, which helps it stay on when sitting or sleeping upright. The blanket was created by Israeli design firm Lili Design, founded by Idan Neuberg and Gal Bulka. The duo submitted the blanket design while participating in the Cockpit by El Al Accelerator program, designed to catalyze startups and new technological innovations in the aviation industry. Lili Designs has also created a line of airline pajamas and airline trays for El Al, among other items. Not to mention the customizable and fun popcorn bowl, She Popco. All these amazing products and more are available on Lily Design's website, but the pajamas and blankets can already be found en route during your next El Al flight.
That's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of ILTV's Weekly Review. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.